comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California, pushing on the doors of life marked pull and fighting the unholy trinity as we go. Big business, organized religion, and government.
I am back, and you are comfortably zoned with me, the Zigzag Man, Alameda, California, right in the middle of summer. Incredible East Bay, right across the bay from San Francisco and across the moat from Oakland. Alameda is a small little conservative town which has gone unbelievably in the opposite direction of late. I can talk about that and other things with my guest, my friend Howie Gordon. How are you, sir?
I'm terrifical. I'm busy in the garden trying to breathe new life into a nectarine tree by taking it out of a stuffed pot and putting it in the ground. And it is so happy to get out of that half-oaken barrel and be into a place where it can spread its roots. You can just feel the joy. It's like it just got out of prison. And he's, glorious. Big fruit coming. I look forward to it.
The roots will spread, as anybody taken out of prison will do. You just spread out in all different directions when you're confined, not just prison, but anything institutional, the service, even higher education. When you're released, you can spread your wings a little bit, and I'm sure the same holds true for
a nectarine tree.
Greenery, nectarines in this case. What a great fruit, too, if you're going to grow something.
Oh, I have a white one. I like the white nectarines the best.
Half a peach, half a plum. Well, I can remember Mel Brooks doing something about nectarines. So, what's going on, Howie? We were talking a little bit off the air, reminiscing about the old days, and I brought up a place where separately, but maybe on the same night every now and again, we would hang, you and I. It was a mansion in San Francisco, and
on Nob Hill somewhere.
Yeah. And this is the most interesting building I've ever been in my life. Every room is decorated with old rugs and artifacts from all over the world, stuffed animals, hangings, and what have you. And I don't know if it was rented out or given out with permission, but a whole bunch of partiers in the 80s got to hang there, and I was privileged myself to spend a number of evenings there partying with some enlightened people. It was right before the AIDS epidemic really took hold, something we talked about last week, and how you mentioned how it changed the porn industry. It changed everything related to open sex. You didn't have to be in the porn industry. I certainly wasn't, but my life as a single person living in San Francisco in the 80s, straight as I can get type thing, I went from being a commodity to being yesterday's news, because no one was experimenting, no one had open relationships, no one had recreational sex in mind. It got to the point, like you mentioned last week, where people became monogamous who were not really ready for monogamy at some of us.
Well, there was a time when I love you became a death threat. Because not only were you fucking the person, you were fucking every person that they were fucking. And no one was sure for a good while about how the disease was being spread. There was a year after the AIDS epidemic crossed over from the gay population and the Haitian population into the heterosexual community. When it was just in the gay world, you had to be in that world to feel its effects and to feel its terror, because it was lethal.
But it
But I remember it was November.
Because of the needle use, because of
well, that too.
Haitians, it transcended just homosexuality.
It did. I forgot about the needle. Well, they were pretty sure that it could be blood transferred. But nobody knew is the point of where I was going with that. When it was first identified, the threat came from gay people, IV drug users, and Haitians. Those were the three sources of communicating the disease that were mentioned on November the 10th. God, this is branded in my brain. 1984. That's when the Chronicle ran a headline about the first heterosexual transmission of AIDS when 2 Johns were infected by 2 female prostitutes. And that necessitated my friend Michael Rossman from the free speech movement at Cal became like an adopted big brother. He came over to my house that day and said, I've done some calculations. He was a mathematician. Based on the numbers reported in the Chronicle, and you're in the wrong business at the wrong time. You need to quit. And my wife really liked hearing that because she was done being a porn star's husband. It started off as something cute that her husband did to something that she was ready for him to be done doing. So she leaned on me too.
Was just about right. Let me tell you how it was for just somebody who enjoyed sex and wasn't into it on a professional level. But I had several what they used to call fuck buddies in those days. And
they still call them that.
No real emotional tie, like the people for the most part, but just pals that we'd have recreational sex. And I remember going over to someone's house. I can't even remember her name right now. I could pretty much describe her body, but but not her name. And I regret that.
She's probably grateful for that right now.
But I walk in and she has this little button, like a Nixon button, with a sticker thing. Not even a sticker, the thing that goes into your clothes. And it was like the button said, "We will wear a condom."
Well, that was a year later when they started talking about safe sex.
Right.
We didn't realize, and you had to remember that at that point in time, that organic condoms made from animal skins didn't stop the disease at all. Went right through those. You had to use a latex condom.
Right.
And that went all the way to if you're going to do oral sex, you should use a dental dam. And the AIDS information people said there should be no exchange of bodily fluid. And for a long time, there was a debate whether the disease could be spread through kissing. And this really hit Hollywood, not just the porn world, because kissing a stranger, kissing someone who was kissing a lot of people, would that give you the disease? There was a panic in Florida about mosquitoes spreading the disease because they bite blood, they drink blood, and then they go bite the next person. So if it's a bloodborne disease, can it be spread that way? And like I said, we didn't know shit, and it was a year before we started getting some decent information.
I blame the bulk of that on the Reagan administration, which did nothing in terms of research. They were just as happy as hell to rid themselves of those three groups of folks: Haitians, needle users, and gays.
It was a win-win for them to do nothing.
It really was, and they put off any sort of research for about a year.
But there was a lot of private money going into it, and there were other cultures. It wasn't just the United States that was involved. I mean, the whole world was brought to its knees by this in some fashion.
But it would have been nice to get some information out there, if nothing else.
Yeah. It was largely just panic. I mean, I remember in the industry, people like John Leslie, I told him I'm not going to work anymore until we know what's going on. I got babies. I'm not interested in playing Russian roulette with my dick. And he got mad at me. He said, I'm not going to get it. And I said, okay, you alfalfa disease, go right ahead. And people who had their incomes invested in that world didn't want to hear about it. And so they just put their heads in the sand. And certainly the producers and directors who were cashing in huge money at that point in time, porn was booming, did not want to know about it, did not want to acknowledge it. And even a year later, when they discovered you could fuck safely with no exchange of bodily fluids and using latex, they didn't want to hear that either, because movies that had condoms in them made less money than movies without. So it was all about money. And they would just go, take it or leave it. Here's the job. No condom, and business as normal. And we were lucky, in hindsight, if you to coin a phrase, that the disease wasn't as easily spread as we thought it could be, because we'd all be dead. It turned out to a more, because Nina Hartley, who was a trained fucking nurse, she and I would get into these huge arguments because she would look at the information and say it's not dangerous. And I say, you're fucking crazy. And I attribute it to the fact that she was brand new and she wanted, like, desperately to be a sex star. So this was her opportunity. She had just broken through to being in that business, and she didn't want to deny the opportunity to herself. So I just put it down to that, and I thought she was having a severe lack of common sense, especially for someone who should know better, a medically trained person. But she didn't get it, Maine, and I'm glad for that because she's a terrific lady. But we went around on that a lot of times.
I'm sure there were those that you knew that did get it, and you got to deal with that.
Not many. The couple of guys who did gay porn that I knew and used to switch back and forth between gay and straight, they came. One of those, a guy named Randy Rotman, a really nice guy, he came down with it. He died. In those days, it was a death sentence. You didn't live long after you found out you had it.
6 months if you're unlucky, because the death is not a pleasant one.
Well, it was rough. It was rough. And San Francisco was devastated. Just the whole community was devastated. I used to get a haircut at a place called Jerry Shorts, a very popular barber shop. They had 30, 40 people working there. And it was all gay. And they all died. It just went away.
The garage sales. I remember going out on Sundays and driving around San Francisco and the garage sales. I'm like a 40 right off the rack. Tweed jackets. Take $1. This type of thing. Unbelievable amount of clothing out there. And there wasn't a time that I didn't feel guilty about the entire experience of garage sailing.
Yeah.
Terrible times.
Yeah.
All right, Howie, I'm going to let you talk about what you want. I just put one question together over the week for the next time we did get to talk. I want to know how it is that you write. Do you make an appointment with yourself to write? Do you write down things as they hit you? Do you talk into a machine and then transcribe your thoughts onto paper? Do you type? Do you type in the computer?
All of those things have happened over the course of years.
Okay.
I started keeping
have you settled on? Looking at your completed work, how long did it take you to write that? I think you told me once 5, 6 years.
The book Hindsight?
Yeah.
That the first version of it was finished in 1984. It took me 30 years to get it published. And it was written and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten and refined and refined and refined many, many times over those years. That's not a story so much about writing as it is publishing and my inability to be a salesperson. I'm the Jew who didn't get the memo when it comes to all that.
Well, I thought you
a
owned the bank
huckster.
like the rest of us Jews, so that
Yeah.
you didn't need money. No?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought all of us Jews owned the bank. A lot of people think that, by the way.
Yeah, I know, and it's always, it made me giggle. Another great giggle. I went to a school that was half Jewish and half non-Jewish, all white, pretty much, except for 3 or 4 black guys. But we were known as a Jewish school in the city, and so there was an all-black school called Westinghouse, which was the power, great football team in Pittsburgh, high school football, and there were maybe 2 Jews on the football team a year, and everybody else was from the other parts of the city that went to our high school, other neighborhoods. And when we played Westinghouse one year, one of the linemen said to me after the game, he said, "I had my first taste of anti-Semitism today." He wasn't Jewish. I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, we're on a line in a football game, and this black guy across from me goes, 'You fucking Jew, I'm going to fucking take your fucking head off, you fucking Jew bastard.'" He said he was fucking Catholic. He said, "Oh my God." Not only, he said, "I get it. I get it. They don't like, there's people out there that don't like Jews." I said, "Well, welcome to my world."
At least it's overt, not covert. You got to appreciate that on some level.
Yeah. Well, let me get back to your question. The way I'm writing right now is a very interesting phenomenon that's happened in the last 2-3 years. I find myself dreaming. I'm sleeping, and it's in my dream. And I am coming across a really good phrase, a really good idea. And I go, "Oh, that's good. I want to remember that." And I'm sleeping now. This is all in dreamland. This is like late in sleep. I'm getting close to the dawn, and I start repeating this scene or this phrase or this idea over and over, so I'll remember it when I wake up because it's a good one, and I don't want to let it get away. And so I'm stuck in a perseveration of the idea or the phrase, and I have to remember exactly like it is because I've really nailed it. It's there. It's perfect. And I'm over and over and over, and I start to get frustrated because a word will change. And no, what was that word? Oh, no, shit. I had it. Oh, no, it's getting away. Oh, fuck. And I'm get up. Get up. I'm saying to myself, get up. Go to the fucking desk. Get up. Write it down now. And I do. Well, that's become a pattern. Where I find myself writing in my sleep, and when I start to think it's really good, I get up and go write it down. And a lot of really good stuff has happened like that in the past couple of years, where sometimes I don't go back to bed. I just sit down and start writing.
You're analyzing your dreams.
Well, I'm reporting them. I'm not analyzing them. I'm just, the thing starts writing in my sleep. I get the topic sentence of the paragraph comes to me, and I'm launched. It's not an analysis. It's a reportage. I'm just the observer here. The writing is going on unconsciously, and I'm seeing it, and I'm go record it. I'm a tape recorder. I'm just remembering what I just wrote without being conscious that I'm the writer. It's just coming to me.
Is that your sole source of?
No, but that's the good stuff. That's the great stuff.
Okay.
Writing in the end is not writing. Writing is rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. It's refinement. If I could sit down to my book now, which I've worked on for 30 years and rewritten ad infinitum, if I read it today, I want to change something. I'm always touch-keying with it. It's hard to let it,
right.
You're not. If a painting's never done, you just stop painting. You can always keep working on the how you said something and how you want to say something, and
so you will have revised editions of your book.
Yeah, but at some point it's time to publish. You go the game starts. You get in the game.
Right,
and
then there's that entirely different aspect of the game, and that's called distribution. sales,
Oi.
management.
Oi, Gavalt. Oi. Now you're into where I'm lost. But that's interesting that you began with this question, because I picked out a piece that a friend of mine handed me a stack of papers that I had given him years ago to look at stuff, and he gave it back and said thank you. And I had given him this piece I'll share with you now. It's the introduction. It's called Introduction, and begins with a quote from Thomas Paine from Common Sense. It says, "My country is the world. My religion is to do good." And the title is Daffy Duck is a Quack Dealer. Prostitutes, pimps, and junkies. Lowlife and scum all. The mob. These are the people whom mainstream America would have us believe are the only ones who populate the X-rated world, the ones who dance naked in our bars and nightclubs, who pose for naughty pictures in our magazines, and the ones who fill our video screens with the images of erotic delight. It never dawns on the mainstream mind that some of these people might also be just like you and me, that some of these people might just like sex. It is one of the amazing paradoxes of our time that although we all use sex and the promise of its magic to sell everything from chewing gum to cars, anyone who professionally tackles sex directly for itself is relegated by polite society to a virtual quasi-criminal status and sentenced to a public life on the smelly underbelly of the great American eagle. I'm tired of it. I'm just so tired of it. For more than 14 years, that's how long ago this was, I have tried to market this book with the mainstream publishers, the prophet-appointed guardians of American thought. And for 14 years I have been told that I have painted a wonderful picture on a subject that is totally unsuitable for framing. Well, kiss my ass, fellas. It only took Odysseus 10 years to get back to Ithaca. They tell me that it takes an agent to sell a book these days, and for years I have tried to latch on to one of those. Agents are like the pilot fish who swim with the sharks. They have a symbiotic relationship with the publishers. It is largely the agents who sort through the debris of incoming literary prayers in search of the ones that smell like money. When they find one, they translate it into the appropriate shorthand and sound bites that the publishers themselves have prescribed to save them from doing the effort. And for this service, the agent class is rewarded with crumbs from the great table of book selling. It's the free market economy at work. Over the years, agents who have auditioned my particular work have told me that I have painted a wonderful picture. But when they got back to me after meeting with the powers that be, they've added, on a subject that is totally unsuitable for framing. And I thought, if only I could find the right agent, one who believed in me, one who believed in the work, then maybe that could make the difference. When Boogie Nights came out, and the mainstream media got all aflutter about this charming little adventure into Smutland, I revised this effort yet again in the hopes that my time had come for publication in something besides magazines like Wide Open Beavers. Through Frank Wiegers, an old friend in the business, I was introduced to Sandra Watt of the Sandra Watt Literary Agency in Los Angeles. I handed her a 500-page version of the story and started turning on the charm. She stopped me cold. Sandy told me she didn't want to know me and she didn't want to like me because it would stop her from doing her job. It's got to be on the page, she said. I want to read what you have on the page without anything coloring my judgment. Then I'll know if I want to represent you or not. She was all hard-nosed in business. I was pretty impressed. 3 months later, I get a call from Sandy. She has just returned from 14 business meetings in New York City. Her voice is positively gleeful. First of all, she says, I feel like I know you. I've read a lot of books where afterwards I couldn't tell you anything about the author, but I feel like I know you, and I really love who you are. Besides that, I think you are a great writer. This is the agent, I tell myself. At long last, the Lord has sent me my Moses. So I'm waiting to hear all about what deal she has made. You know what your problem is? She says. You like fucking too much. The editors are scared shitless of your stuff. They're all afraid of what their marketing people will say. And she's laughing and cackling like the Wicked Witch of the West on a tequila binge. And though I am instantly aware that we are dealing with a rejection here, I find myself laughing right along with her. You should have seen the faces on these 3 young female editors I was having lunch with, she said. I'm telling them that you had them laughing and crying at the World Pornography Conference, getting a standing ovation. I'm telling them this guy can really sell some books. Do you want me to bring him to New York? You got to meet him. There was another loud burst of cackling laughter here. You should have seen the looks on their faces. They're scared to death of you. And the bottom line here is that the book-selling industry is not prepared to deal with someone from the porno world who actually liked it. If you took the position that the X-rated industry was all evil and that you were a sinner in search of redemption, I could sell it tomorrow. But that's not you, and that's not your story. And I loved your story. You just love fucking too much. The title, even when it was bad, it was good, creeps into my mind at that point. One last thumbing of my nose at the conventional purveyors of literature as I finally decide to turn my back on them. If an agent who feels like this about me and my work can't catch a fish in the mainstream pond, it just ain't never going to happen. Much as I want to do it, much as I don't want to do it, it's time to head down that uncertain road of self-publishing. God help me. Red hot dirty words here. Get your red hot dirty words here. How many, mister? You want fries with your sexual subversion? For an idea that does not at first seem insane, there is no hope. Albert Einstein said that. So, fasten your seatbelts, my friends, because here we go. Tired of being blacklisted by the forces of hypocrisy for a decade and a half, we now turn to our own printing press like Thomas Paine of old. If it is a revolution to report the truth as our eyes have seen it, then so be it. We will have faith that our own common sense will guide us.
Well, very well written. Howie, have you ever gotten on a comedic stage?
Yes.
Have you? Yes?
Yes. When I was, I'll just give you the climax of the story. When AIDS came along and I retired from the business, I had some measure of notoriety because I was one of the few porn stars of the time. That was when I was just broken into the top tier, who was talking about it and saying I refuse to work until we figure out what's going on here. And somehow Joan Rivers, who had a talk show at that point in time, her people got word of it and invited me to New York City to be on her show. And this was like, top drawer stuff, Plaza Hotel. They paid for everything. And I'm on the Joan Rivers show. And on the Joan Rivers show that day, when I wasn't talking about AIDS, which was not very funny, I was very funny on because I got into like how difficult it was for me to get hard in front of camera people, and I was funny. And at the break, Joan Rivers says, "You are funny. You know that. You should be doing stand-up." And I said, "Well, that's why I'm here. I need the next career." She said, "Okay." And she points to a guy off stage. She says, "When we're done talking, you go see him. He'll get you going in the biz, and you'll be launched." And okay, I'm getting discovered again. It's happened to me a few times, and so I'm excited and cautious. And I go see the guy after the show, and he says, "I own a string of comedy clubs in Canada, and I want to start you right now. You'll start off on the East Coast, you'll work your way to the West, and in 6 months' time, you'll be in L.A." And I go to my wife. This is the year 1984, 85, and we have we have a 2-year-old, a newborn, and that's what's going on. And I tell my wife, I just got discovered. This guy wants me. I tell her what I told you, and my wife just smiles at me and says, "Oh, okay. This is the part where you run off to become a star and leave me home alone with 2 babies? I don't think so, asshole." You find something to do where you can stay home and be with us. And that was the end of my comedy career. I was flattered that I had knocked on that door and it appeared to be opening. But I also knew me. And I did not need, in the age of AIDS, to be on the road by myself where I'm hanging out in nightclubs till 3 o'clock in the morning. I know that the marriage will not survive this because I'm going to fuck. That's what I do. And if I'm left by myself, I'd line them up. I just knew it wouldn't work. As I said, especially in a time of AIDS. And with the newborn babies, I didn't want to be the kind of father that had a divorce situation where he didn't see his kids. I didn't want to be that guy.
I'm so sorry about the timing of that because you have excellent stage. You have a twinkle in your voice and good timing, and you write like a champ, and that's all comedy. Doing comedy is writing, developing timing and a certain rapport with the audience, and you got it. And you'd have no qualms. You would have gotten up without any stage fear, obviously stage fright.
Well, I have that. I have it every time I perform. But you learn to.
It's not fright though. It's kind of an anxiety.
It's fuel.
An excitement.
It's just raw stuff. It's energy, and you learn to. You can't beat it. You just let it guide you and go with it and try to stop your legs from shaking and try to you get a laugh or two, then you're sort of sailing. When it starts to work, it works. And you go through I went through those deaths in front of the camera. When you have had 50 people watching you and you're trying to get a hard on and it doesn't work and you die that death, that I can't think of a lower place on earth. I'm sure there are, and I don't want to find them. But that was about as low as I wanted to
be. As a comedian, as an aspiring comedian, and you're in Modesto and no one gets it.
Yeah.
So that's just as bad.
Yeah. But at least you got to get your pants on.
For a day job, and as soon as the porn thing ended, and it ended quite abruptly.
It did.
Oh,
I went to work for a friend of mine who owned a Captain Video store. A friend of mine owned a Captain Video store, and he offered me a job working there. And I lasted 7 days because there was a girl there who I knew he had a crush on and was dating, and she kept getting a little too close to me when we were back in the racks. And we're in AIDS land, so I'm skeptical about any of that. And on top of that, this girl was tasty, and I didn't want to have to fight myself to hold it off. And it was the wrong place, the wrong time. Don't get out of here. So I did. I quit and didn't tell him any of that. And they got married like a month later. So.
Oh, they did.
It was the right move just to get out of the way of that.
So that's a week of working. What did you do after that?
Well, I started trying to sell writing. I had a piece I had done when I did my first movie. The idea of doing a first movie was about writing. I've always been a writer. I've been writing since 1965. The day my writing turned serious was I had gone to Northwestern in a National High School Institute in journalism, and I was going to go back there for college and be a journalist. And a writer writes is what the professor wrote on the. So write, just write, and then try to see and do interesting things so it's worth reading about. And I started keeping a diary, and it got serious the day I got into a fight with a friend of mine. In fact, he's a very famous guy now. His name is Howie Feynman. He's a political journalist. He was the political editor of the Huffington Post. He worked for Now he's with NBC. You see him on Hardline all the time with. I can't think of the guy's the host of Hardline now. Hardball. Anyway, his name is Howard Fineman, and he's a good buddy. And we had a fight in high school. We were playing football in gym class, and I was nicknamed the Animal because I played with a certain level of ferocity. And this was an innocent play in my mind. I was a defensive back, and he was going out for a pass, and I broke up the pass, and we both fell to the ground. I got up, he got up, and we walked away. Well, an hour later, after school's over, I go to a friend's house where we're all meeting. It's Friday, the weekend's starting. And when I come into the front door, there's Howie lying on a couch with his arm in a sling. And in between when I had seen him, said goodbye on the football field, he had gone to the doctor and been diagnosed with a separated shoulder, and which he blamed on me. And he attacked viciously, verbally. He just really lit into me. And we had a bit of a history that I didn't know anything about until this moment. He would say things like to me, during this monologue of how much he hated me, he was telling me I was the senior class president. And he said, I'm walking down the hall and somebody yells Howie, and I turn around. But it's you they're talking to. It's never me. It's always you. He hates me for being me and for being named Howie. I mean,
no, he hates you. He hates himself for not being you.
I get it. Believe me, I get it. But so I feel, and then he's blaming me for this shoulder separation, and it was. I know what it's like to play dirty, and this wasn't that. It wasn't even close. And if I'm gonna, I've done my share. If I'm gonna be attacked for that, I want to at least be guilty. This had nothing to do with anything below the belt or untoward.
Right.
It's a simple past breakup. He landed funny, and that's what happened. It wasn't like I lowballed him or anything. So I felt like a victim here, and he was just on fire with rage, and I was catching all this resentment that had built for Lord knows how long. And so I came home and I was quite stunned by it, and I sat down to write, and that was the first time my writing turned to any depth, where I tried to understand what the dynamics were, and just telling myself, writing became my best friend. Things that I couldn't tell other people, I could now write about. I opened that door, and it gave me a place, like a self-therapy. It gave me a place to put this stuff out without entering into the social milieu and being responsible for who you tell what to and getting into all that dynamic. I wasn't looking for that. I was just looking to resolve my own inner conflict.
Did you always write as Howie Gordon, or did you have, was it Richard Pacheco at times?
Well, no, there was no Richard Pacheco then. It was all me. I didn't have any stage names. No stage names. And Richard Pacheco was never anything more than a device to protect the family name and to keep people away from my front door. I never, on the set, I was always Howie. Everybody knew I was Howie. It wasn't like there was the least well-known secret in the world that I was Richard Pacheco. I only did that if somebody wanted to interview me or press or any of that. It was ironic because as Howie Gordon, I was the Playgirl Man of the Year. And that was okay because that was over the counter, and that was the huge world difference between R and X. You can be photographed naked with a dick, but if that dick gets up, then you've crossed into X land.
Right.
And that's not okay. That's under the counter or in the back room.
But it is in fact, am I correct? Were you not photographed erect?
I was the very first centerfold to be photographed with an erection. And they made posters of it. I was supposed to get $1 a poster. I was going to get rich. I never got a penny. Never got a fucking penny. Playgirl was the cheapest magazine in the world. They were like the Class D ball in Dubuque. That was the entry-level world of magazines. Everybody there was working for a quarter. And the guy who owned it was making money. Guy named, that's the other problem with it. It was owned by a man and run by a man. And he hired a woman to act like she was the managing them. It was a feminist point of view. Bullshit. Everything was him. It was a lie from the start.
Whoa.
So anyway, the point of that is I'm on Donahue's show, which was the most popular talk show of the era, and I'm Howie Gordon, and I got a good deal of recognition out of that for days. People would know me on the street because Donahue was popular, and I did well on the show as well. About a year and a half later, I get a call from someone who's calling Richard Pacheco and gotten my number from somebody in the business and doesn't know anything about Howie. And it's Donahue's people. They want Richard Pacheco on the show. And I got the message from my wife when I came home. And we were thinking, well, should I do this? At that point in time, her parents did not know that I was making X-rated films. We had kept that information from them. Jeremy wasn't particularly interested in sharing that with the larger world of her. Because of her occupation as a therapist, she didn't want her story to become the narrative. And she also didn't want to deal with her parents on the subject because she didn't think they would be jumping up and down. So we didn't tell them. And if I would do Donahue and be Richard Pacheco, then that would, you couldn't hide that. They would get word of that. And that secret would be out, and we weren't ready to do that. So I didn't do the show. In fact, I remember calling John Leslie, who was a huge star and a good friend. Eventually, we became close friends. And I offered him the gig. Did he want to do Donahue, which was a really prestigious piece. And he said, sure. And he said to me, paid to get laid. And I said, well, I wouldn't lead with that because that's also the definition of prostitution, which is illegal. So find another motto for yourself for mainstream television.
Right. Little moniker.
Yeah.
Is there any one thing that you regret either doing or not doing?
Oh, yeah. There's many things I regret. The chief amongst them was, well, maybe I can even find this if I look quickly. Porn, especially when you're nobody, was a bastion of. Okay, I'll read this. This is a writer in L.A. named Graham. Tell us his last name. Graham somebody. Sent me a copy of the movie Easy that I was in. And the previous chapters leading up to this are me talking about, well, all right, let's just do it. Here we go. Welcome to the circus. Porn has long been a bastion of male fantasy. Men have been the driving economic force behind adult materials since the days of Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble. From creation to consumption, porn has overwhelmingly been a man's world. The sexual fantasies contained therein were the fantasies where men got to have sex all the ways that men wanted to have sex. The real sexual concerns of actual women were never very much of an issue in the depiction of these male fantasies. A case in point may be Deep Throat, the highest-grossing X-rated movie of all time. In that story, a woman discovers that her clitoris is located in her throat. Has this ever happened in real life? Don't think so. It's a male fantasy. Why? In real life, most men don't get their cock sucked near as much as they want. But if a woman really had her clitoris in her throat, she would probably be sucking a lot more cock. See? It's a joke. The clitoris in the throat remains a fiction, but don't worry, our scientists are working on it. Vengeance is mine. Actor Bill Margold once described a common male attitude in porn very well. In an interview for a 1991 book called Porn by a respected UCLA professor of psychiatry, Dr. Robert Stoller, the porn veteran Bill Margold spoke about it this way. My whole reason for being in the industry is to satisfy the desire of the men of the world who basically don't care for women and want to see the men in my industry getting even with the women they couldn't have when they were growing up. I strongly believe this, and the industry hates me for saying it. But I really believe that even the most satisfied Casanova Don Juan Satyr has always wanted somebody he couldn't get. And because of that, he starts to harbor a revenge. So we come on a woman's face, or somewhat brutalize her sexually. We're getting even for the men viewers, lost dreams. I believe this. I've been told this by people in the audience after I've done some horrible things on screen to women. I'm not hurting them. It's only an act, but it looks real because I can scare people. I have a booming voice, and I can become very intimidating. That gets the audience excited. I've heard audiences cheer me when I do something foul on screen. When I've strangled a person or sodomized a person or brutalized a person, the audience is cheering my action. And then when I fulfilled my warped desire, the audience applauds. And so it was, too, my voice again, with Anthony Spinelli. The sex scene he wanted me to perform in Easy was of this same brutal style of porn that I'd mostly managed to avoid in my career until now. First it was with Serena in The Sensuous Detective, and now it was with Spinelli, of all people, the great director, who was asking me to really get into it for Easy. I was crestfallen. It wasn't lovemaking. It wasn't even sex. It was revenge. It was mean and hostile and not my cup of tea at all. Which side are you on, boy? Which side are you on? In matters sexual, I have always been a big fan of reciprocity and fair play. It gets me hot to see and feel a woman get hot. I like it when we can ride over the falls together. Growing up, sex was always filled with such guilt, repression, and recrimination in my life that I have taken great pains to make sure that my partners were in tune with me. It was the pursuit of the two-way street where you get yours and I get mine. Not only was that the romantic ideal, but it was also good politics and nothing more than common sense. Still, it was an attitude rarely reflected in porn movies where the one-way street of male fantasy thrived. Not only that, but it was usually the He-Man highway, where the men involved were oft reduced to their most primitive and intimidating selves. Bend over, bitch, the He-Man would say. Bend over, bitch, and tell me you love it. It was the sexuality of the harem, of prostitution, of powerless men imagining unlimited power. Those were the guys with the dollars who were buying this porn. That was the kind of sex they wanted to see. Porn was never about the sexual search for truth or justice. It's always been about the business. Since the rise of adult film in the 70s, it's been a cruel joke on the culture to present these hostile, vindictive male fantasies as if they are the sum total of the human sexual experience. But that's pretty much what's happened in the absence of a broader audience. The cultural sadness is that this one narrow point of view has dominated the whole of our sexual media. Do angry men have a right to their fantasies? Of course they do. It's not their fault that nobody else is making sex movies. Nobody else who's making sex movies has figured out how to make any money from showing a different point of view. Where are all those other voices? The director, Sam Anthony Spinelli, didn't want to get into an argument with me about sexual politics. Actors act, he said. Good guys, bad guys, what's the difference? It doesn't matter. In the straight world, one might argue that it didn't matter. But porn was being held to a different standard. I always thought the preponderance of male domination was like the industry continuously shooting itself in the foot in terms of gaining any large-scale mainstream acceptance. It kept porn mired like a bad joke in the minor leagues. Common sense said that without a more balanced approach to human sexuality that would genuinely appeal to women, there would be no rise into respectability. How could there be? There was so little there to respect. I took the job in Easy. I made Sam's movie. I played the fucking scumbag, just like the fucking scumbag Sam wanted me to play. Tell me, if I had played Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs, would it have been a step up or a step down? I took the job in Easy. I made Sam's movie. One worked for Anthony Spinelli. One paid one's dues. I figured that porn's past may have belonged to the Neanderthals like Margold and Sam, but I thought that the future belonged to the children of the sexual revolution. Porn couldn't do anything but get better. I'd surf that wave as far as it could take me. 30 years later, a writer friend of mine named Graham Hill actually sent me a copy of this very scene from the movie Easy. Of all the scenes I have ever done, it was probably the last scene I ever wanted to see again. But I did watch it, and I wrote him this letter. Dear Graham, first of all, thanks for thinking of me and sending along that snippet of a movie. When I watched it, I marveled at that body I had. My Lord, I was in such good shape. Also, the acting I did in that scene did not embarrass me. Watching it these many years later, I felt like I nailed the character. And the sex part, once it got started, was hot and sizzled. Jesse St. James and I were well matched to become the two-headed beast, and it showed up there on the screen. Where I die 1,000 deaths is in the sexual politics of that scene in Easy. I regret playing that part. Even though it was my introduction to Anthony Spinelli, and it paved the way for me to enter the upper echelons of the men in porn, I find it disturbing and unconscionable to have portrayed that kind of male rage in the movies. I won't go into any more detail here. I've actually written at length about it in my memoirs. Just between us girls, Graham, the bottom line is that the business didn't need me to add to the avalanche of misogyny that so pervaded the sexual quality of the industry. In hindsight, it is one of the regrets of my career that I ever lent my mind and body to any such effort. I don't argue that men don't have a right to their anger. I've said they do. But the business is radically out of balance in its portrayal of human sexuality, to the great detriment of common sense everywhere.
Well, good answer to my question, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Would you have a good week and do this again next week, Howie?
I'll do my best.
All right. Please stay well. And I want to thank everybody for listening. And if you like this offering or any of the offerings on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, I'm calling out. Do me a solid. Box up some lightly, gently, even new children's books. Take them to the Head Start program. Get as many boxes going in your neighborhood as you can, because these kids in the Head Start program need the books. They need to learn to read. They need to learn to develop an imagination. They need to take their noses out of the devices and the computers. And most of all, they really need to become school ready so they could get a head start. So do me that solid. I'd appreciate it. And be well. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Howie Gordon. I'll be back next week, and can't wait, Howie.
You're a mensch.
You are too. And I really enjoy our Fridays together.
Okay.
All right. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Be well, everybody. Go in peace.